Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Gamewreckers and Slobberknockers. Today, joining us is Coach Cory Hardin, the defensive coordinator from Chaminade Julienne. Welcome, Coach.
Appreciate you having me. Excited to be here. Hopefully, I can learn a little bit. You guys can learn a little bit, and we can go from there.
I think we're probably going to learn a lot more than you are from me being the goofy host, because I tell you what, my job is just to have fun and try to get some knowledge out of you.
There you go. I'm gonna try. Yeah.
All right, Coach. Hey, I know you pretty well. Tell our listeners and viewers here a little bit about yourself, kind of like your history of coaching and any playing experiences you've had.
Okay. Originally from Fairborn, Ohio. 2005 grad from there. I had the opportunity to go play college ball. Started off at St. Joseph's College in Indiana, and then transferred to, it's now Mount St. Joseph University, down in Cincinnati. Was a 2-year starter down there, captain my senior year, and kind of in between summers, I would come back to Fairborn, and that's kind of how the coaching ball started to get rolling. Would help out during summer practices and help out during 7-on-7s, and that's where I really found that, it was something that I wanted to do. So after I graduated, had the opportunity to join the staff as a JV head coach and defensive backs coach under Roy Toby. Spent 2 years there. Then I had the opportunity to be a graduate assistant at Urbana University for 2 years. My first year I worked with the receivers. Second year I worked with the defensive backs. And then after that, it didn't look like I was close to graduating. So I made the decision to give up my spot as a graduate assistant, because I know those are highly sought after. And, my intention was to graduate with my master's degree. So I decided to step away. Had the opportunity to talk to Marcus Colvin, who was the head coach at Chaminade. Had a great conversation with him. He offered me the defensive backs job. I took it and kind of worked it itself from there. It's kind of funny, the Wednesday or Thursday before our jamboree scrimmage, he comes to me and says, I liked how you've been working. I think I can really trust you in what we're doing. He said, how would you like to be the defensive coordinator? And my first thought was, okay, that's great. My second thought was, we're about a week away from our first game, and I don't know I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. But that was a conversation that kind of going into it, that he knew that was the end goal for me, was to become the defensive coordinator at some point. So I must have worked hard enough to impress him and feel comfortable enough to where he felt comfortable enough for me to take over the reins, because he was calling it. He had been calling it for probably about 6, 7, 8 years before that. And when he took the job as head coach, he was still calling the defense. So he passed it over to me, and I've been doing it now for, I think I just finished up my 7th season. So, I've enjoyed it. We've made some changes along the way, some much needed changes along the way as far as scheme is concerned. But I enjoy every minute of it. I love our kids. They work hard. Our coaching staff works hard. So I'm blessed to be where I'm at.
Well, I tell you what, your journey surely got you ready for it. You played at 2 different colleges, and then you GA'd at a 3rd style of college.
Right.
So everybody always hears these stories about GAs.
Right.
And like it's the worst job. It's just awful work. Was it really that bad?
Yes and no. It's definitely a grind, especially at the D2 level, because you don't have as many full-time coaches on staff. So some of those full-time responsibilities falls on the GA's shoulders. And as I came in, it was told to me that you make your full-time coach's job easier, and whatever that looks like. So it was equipment, it was strength and conditioning, it was making sure we had everything we needed to travel, on top of coaching your own position, recruiting. Like there was some full-time responsibilities that we had as GAs that GAs at most D1 schools don't have, just because there's full-time coaches there. So a lot of the grunt work falls on their shoulders. Well, we got the grunt work and we got those full-time responsibilities. So it was definitely a grind. But I definitely learned a lot as a football coach. I learned a lot as a person, as a man, just through the experiences that I went through. There was a lot of sleepless nights where, you leave the office at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and then have to turn around and be there at 5:30. A lot of Monster energy drinks were drank during that time to get me through, but it was a great experience. Learned from a great head coach in Dave Tainer. Had the opportunity to work under him because he called the offense. Got to work under Paul Smith, who was our defensive coordinator at the time. And it was a great opportunity for me because I learned both sides of the ball, which not many GAs get to do. Usually you are stuck on that side of the ball until you move on. I got to experience both sides and some special teams. I worked with E.J. Henderson, who was our receivers coach and special teams coordinator at the time. So I really learned the game. I learned scenarios, situations that, I had not been privy to before I got there.
Right. Well, hey, you talked about late nights. I'm sure there are a lot of late nights in college because I know when I was a DC, there were late nights in high school sometimes, so, it just kind of prepped you for the job that you were getting to. And I think Coach Colvin did a great thing for you by just, hey, he made you jump like, hey, it's time for you to be the defensive coordinator. Congratulations. You're it.
Exactly.
Like you didn't have the time to think about like, I don't know. Like, okay, well, let's go do this thing.
Let's go do it. And I try to adopt as much as he did as a DC so I could keep it consistent. And then as I've grown year after year, I've kind of slowly taken it over to now it's kind of my baby. And, he trusts me fully. He listens to my ideas. He thinks that, I'm a pretty good coach to just let me run the show. And he's kind of taken a step back so he could manage and be the CEO of the team. So,
and you guys are doing good. It's, everybody had kind of a funky year, I think this year with COVID, but
right.
we did survive. We did make it through it. And there were some times where we weren't sure we were going to get there, but we did.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. To the state of Ohio.
Yep. And you guys, year in, year out, you guys are one of the better programs in the Dayton area. And you guys, you do a great job with your kids. We scrimmage you, every year here for the past 4 or 5 years. And our kids do one thing. It was going to be some thumping.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's
it's always the grind, coming to you or you coming to us.
Right.
It was fun times.
And we missed out this year because nobody let us scrimmage. So.
Right.
So, hey, Coach, one of the things you do really well is you play your stack defense. So let's talk a little bit about your stack defense. How did you settle on the stack defense as your base?
So kind of the history behind it is, when I was at St. Joe's, that was our base defense was stack. Primary coverage was cover one. It's kind of ironic. The head coach that I played for, Lou Esposito, he's now the defensive coordinator at Western Michigan, and he no longer runs the stack, from my understanding, but he still kind of implements some of the things that we did at St. Joe's up there in Western Michigan. So played in it. When I got to Mount St. Joe, we kind of played with it a little bit, but we weren't necessarily based out of the stack. And so when I got to Urbana and coached on the defensive side of the ball, we ran the stack. So kind of familiar with it from, my journey. And then, you fast forward to CJ. When I took over, we were a 4-man front. We had the dudes to do it. We had the bodies to do it. And then that next year was a year where we lost a lot of cats, both to graduation and transfer. And we weren't as deep as we were previously, and we made the decision to go to a 3-man front. But going back and looking at the analysis of the season, a lot of what we were doing out of our 3-4 stuff was stack based. So I finally went to Colvin. I said, look, I'm comfortable with the stack. This is what I know. let's get into it. He first was hesitant. He said, I'm not that familiar with the stack, so if you can show me that we'll still be sound, we'll still be able to stop the run, because at the time the GCL was very run heavy, a lot of wing T, a lot of triple, those running style of offenses. There wasn't as much spread on our schedule. He said, if you can prove to me that we'll still be sound and be able to stop those types of offenses, we'll roll with it. And we came up with a great plan, and obviously it always goes back to dudes. We had a good crop of kids to implement the scheme with, and then we were able to be successful. And the rest is, I don't want to say history, but the rest is, it is what it is. We were able to go to the playoffs a few times and have some success, and we're still riding with it now.
Well, when you talk about defending those formations, you're right. When you were getting started, the two teams that pop out in my mind are Carroll and Alter. And those teams at that time were, Coach Bartlett at Carroll was split back veer.
Yep.
He's going to have a tight end every time.
Yep.
And, people always ask, how are you as a stack defense going to defend a tight end formation offense?
Honestly, because of how we're lined up, there's not much that we have to do. Now, we can have some different adjustments that I like to do to it. But we'll line up in our base. Our base is, 2-5 techniques at defensive end, a head up nose on the center. And then our stacks are stacked right in behind in a 50. And then our Mike linebackers in a 0-0 stacked right behind the nose. And then we got our 2 overhang players. So, some call it a 3-3-5, some call it a 3-5. It's depends on how you get taught, but I consider it a 3-3-5, but some will consider it a 3-5 just because of how we line up in our shell. So we still got our 2 overhangs down. We play with some too high stuff, but our base is going to be, you're going to get 8 close to the box. We'll have that middle of the field close safety, and then see if we can stop the run. So a tight end doesn't necessarily scare us, because we can line up to it, still be gap sound, and then we can shift to a couple different fronts that, if you're really trying to hammer it in there, that we'll still be sound, and add a couple extra guys down at the line of scrimmage to combat that.
Right. And Alter at the same time, they were running wishbone stuff. They hadn't got truly in. They hadn't really gone all in on their spread.
Right.
And even now, they'll still go back to the wishbone stuff.
Oh, yeah.
In there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay.
We definitely saw a nice bit of that week 8. It was supposed to be week 10, but week 8.
Right. Well, I know this. I know how much those 2 games, especially, mean to CJ, because I hear all the talk. We don't have a lot of kids from Xenia go to CJ. We have a couple. I think we have a girl golfer that you guys. Well, you guys have a girl golfer.
Right.
That's one of our Xenia students. But if our kids go, their feeder school is usually Carroll. So I know how heated that rival is, and I know how everybody hates that team over there on East David Road.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, it's I never understood it until I got into it. I actually had an opportunity to GA with Cory Hardin, who is a CJ alum, and we getting recruiting. I was recruiting a little bit of the Dayton area, and he's like, I said, hey, I'm gonna stop over at Alter. He was like, hey, forget those guys, man. We don't mess with Alter. I was like, why, man? It's over. You graduate. Like, now that I'm in it, though,
you understand.
I understand, and it's the same way for them. There's a level of respect, for both teams, but at the end of the day, we don't like them, they don't like us, and we try to battle it out every year.
And that's what makes high school football so great. Hey, one of the other offenses that I think sometimes people wonder about is the wing T. Now, I know you have your overhang players, and those guys I'll talk about here in a minute. But, like, with the wing T, like old school wing T, not like this new version, being in the gun, because to me, being in the gun, yeah, you're running wing T plays, but you don't cause, I think, the formation problems
Right.
that a normal play. So if you get a true, and I think maybe Fenwick under the center wing T team.
Yeah. So my first year, they were wing T under center, and then my second year as DC, they went to triple. And then after my second year, the coach left, and they brought in a new coach, and then they started spreading it out. So,
right.
Oh no, I take that back. My third year, they were split back veer.
Okay.
And then after that is when they got the new coach and started spreading it out. So, yeah, Fenwick, they when they made that transition to, you know, winning a lot more football games, getting to the playoffs, you know, there was one year they beat Alter twice and different things like that. They were really, really good. They were running the wing T. So, again, it goes back to dudes. They had the dudes to do it.
Right.
But at the same time, it gave a lot of people fits.
So how did you deal with it being a stacked defense?
So, yeah, we try to change our front a little bit. We don't try to sit in the stack just because of the angles. One thing I've learned about wing T is all about the angles. If they can get the angles, they're good to go, especially if they're trying to run buck sweep or jet or anything like that. So we really try to cut off those angles by, you know, putting guys in gaps. One thing that we did is, you know, get into what we call our tough front. Is, you know, we'll bring a guy down on the tight end. We'll leave the 5 there. We'll shade the nose to a 1 to the strong side. Backside, we'll have a 3. Backside, we'll have a 5. So kind of it's an underfront, really.
Right.
And just try to cut off those angles, let our linebackers play fast. And then what we tried to do against, because we played Bellbrook in the playoffs this year. Now, I will say Bellbrook gave us a good piece of work because they are really well coached. And they don't run, I would say, a traditional style of wing T. They're more gap scheme based as far as power, counter, you know, stuff like that. Which going into the game, I kind of took for granted because I thought they were going to try to get more buck sweep and that type of offense going because of, you know, they had some injuries, but they stayed the course. But we kind of stayed in our stack, but added another guy to the line of scrimmage. So essentially, we had a 9-man box, and that seemed to work okay. But really, you know, what did the best job, honestly, even though the scoreboard probably would tell you different, is staying in our stack and just blitzing different guys. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think it depends on the team we play. I think it also depends on matchups. Do we have great matchups, you know, whether it's up front with our linebackers to their, you know, skill players, whatnot, will determine what we do. But we try, honestly, what it comes down to is we try to be as basic as we can be and run what our kids know. For a while there, early on as a DC, you know, I was young and dumb and trying to come up with a flavor of the week defense. And, you know, when we saw those type of teams, so we would have our base defense. And then when we saw a wing T type team or a bone type team or a triple type team, you know, we had a different front for every week, and it wasn't doing any good. And our kids learned it. Don't get me wrong. Our kids did a great job of learning it, but, you know, you always look back and you say, if we played our base, how better and how faster could we play, just because our kids had reps at it for longer than a week, you know? So, you know, that's what, you know, as we continue to progress, and now our schedule has changed so much from when I first started. You know, we would see at least 1 or 2 wing T teams. We'd see, obviously, Alter, who runs the bone and different things like that. Honestly, our schedule this year was all spread for the most part, except for Bellbrook. So it kind of, and Alter, obviously, but it kind of, you know, now that we have to get in our heavier packages and stuff like that, our kids still aren't used to it, even though we put it in and we rep it and things like that. You know, your schedule dictates how much you run of that stuff. And fortunately and unfortunately, we saw a lot of spread teams this year, so we didn't use it as much. So,
and I think there are two things. One, when you're facing the wing T, I think you're right. You got to find out what series are they.
mm-hmm.
Are they the Buck series team? Are they the Jet Belly series team? Are they the Power Gap Scheme series now? Because everybody seems, even though they're still running Gap Scheme. And then the other thing I think is, when you're talking about how much better would you have been if you'd have just played your base, I think when you do know your base as well as you do, that what the answers of what they're doing are. Like, hey, if they're killing us with the Buck series,
Right.
here's how we fix that problem. Right. And it's not like jumping into the, like you said, the flavor of the week defense. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, we're going to do that. We're going to do that this week, and this is what we're going to do. You may not know all the answers. Like, hey, if we're doing this front and they're killing us with this series or this play, what's our answer to that, right? So right. There is an advantage of being of like, this is our base. We know these are our answers, and this is how you get to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the versatility of the stack defense does allow you to do some of that stuff relatively easy, where it's not as hard to get, it's not as hard to make adjustments. Like if you're in a 4-front, if you need to go play a 3-man front, how do you get to it? Are you subbing right. somebody? Right. Are you taking your most athletic defensive lineman on the boundary side and he becomes the drop? So you got to change some of that stuff.
Exactly. And it has been great because now it's almost like you're, a mastermind, because you can play with a little bit of those numbers a little bit. You can start in a 3-man front. You can start in a 4-man front, a 5-man front. I've seen 6-man fronts out of the stack. So, and we line up in a 3, 4, and a 5-man front at any given time, and keep the same personnel on the field. So, I think that's what I enjoy about the stack. If you want to get into too high safety things, if you got the personnel to do it, we did a little bit of that this year, and we've done it every year. But I think this year we had a kid that was really athletic, but wasn't athletic enough to be like a corner or safety, like a true middle of the field safety. But he was athletic enough to play man-to-man. He was athletic enough to read 3 away. He was athletic enough to, be up in the box or back on the hash. And we never asked him to play half of the field, but he could do it if we needed him to. But, if you have the personnel to do it, there's endless options when it comes to the stack, because you can dial up what you want and go from there.
And whether it's a 3-5, the 3-3-5, listen to me, it's the 3-3, because everybody else is just our extra guys. The box is what counts. There's 6 guys in that box. You better know those 6, right?
Exactly.
All right. So go ahead, Coach.
I was gonna say, and that's why I like it, because, again, being a G at Urbana, it's about the numbers. Offense, for the most part, are looking at numbers. Do they have the numbers advantage? And we try to eliminate that as much as possible. So, that's why I like having the 6 in the box. And I'll give you an example. When we get trips, we try not to break the stack. We try not to pull that guy out. We try to keep that box, filled with our 6 guys and let them stop the run. And if they're hitting us on the outside, we'll figure out something coverage-wise to negate that. So I will very rarely break the box.
Right.
Because I like that 6-man box.
Right. Hey, I'm as an even front guy, right? To my core, I'm an even front guy. I don't want to break 6 guys. I don't want to bring 6 guys. I don't want to make 5 guys in the box, because
right.
Look, I can count. I can count too. Offensive guys aren't the only ones that can count. I can count to 5 too.
Right.
They have, even if they're empty, they got 6. If I go with 5, we're short a dude, and I have to have somebody whip somebody up front.
Yeah, exactly.
So I need to, so I'm with you on that thought process of maintaining box integrity of your defense as much as you can. All right, coach. So you talked about your overhang players, and I think that's what makes that defense so unique. How do you coach your overhang players? Are they more linebacker trained? Are they more DB trained?
So I think it depends on the position. So our strong side overhang. Let me kind of back up. Our initially when we installed the defense, our defense flipped.
Okay.
Field boundary. About 2 or 3 years ago, we made the decision not to flip just because it keeps the read consistent for that player.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking at the same thing every time. Now, if there's a matchup situation, we'll sometimes flip the backers or something like that. But the only people that flip are the hang players, the overhang players. So our strong side field overhang is more of your traditional outside linebacker type kid is who I look for. Someone who's going to be able to set the edge, force the ball to turn back in, but is athletic enough not to, get reached or anything like that. Or, he is your typical outside linebacker type player. That boundary overhang is more of that tweener kid who is too small to play linebacker, but is either too big or too stiff to play safety. But you can still get away with putting him back on the hash every once in a while. Can get away with like the kid this year. He wasn't stiff by any means. He was athletic as all get out. So we were able to play a little more man-to-man and different things like that because he's normally your adjuster. At least for me, he's normally my adjuster when I need him to, go guard a number 2 or play back and read 3 away or, whatever that is. So fortunately for me, I coach the overhang players. So how I kind of run my individual is we work on our run reads, block destruction, and then we get into our pass reads, steps, all that. So, I try to give it the best of both worlds as much as possible. Now, sometimes I'll send my rover, who's the boundary overhang, I'll send him with the DBs if they need to work on something. If I need to, like I had a kid this year who was a sophomore, 6'3"-ish, 6'4"-ish, long arms, but he was like $175. But he was great with his hands and he could extend and different things like that. So he would sometimes be my adjuster to come down to the line of scrimmage and set the edge. So sometimes I would send him down to the D line. It just all depends on personnel. I've had a kid a few years ago who was 6'2", 190, great looking athlete who was athletic enough. He played the number 1 receiver at times on offense, who was just athletic enough and just God gave him the talents to just play in space. Throwing bubble on him was very hard. Throwing screen on him was very hard because he was going to block destruct and he was going to get to the ball. And then I also had another kid who was probably about 5'7", 160 pounds, who you look at him and you're like, he should never play varsity football, played 11 games for us at our boundary safety. So, it's what you need, or what you plan on calling. It kind of dictates who plays where. Like I said, we were able to do some things with the kid we had this year just because he was so daggone athletic, but he wasn't athletic enough to go play corner or anything like that. So I think the philosophy changes for that position a little bit year in and year out based off of who I have available.
Good. Hey, now, so there are a couple questions that every 3-3 team gets asked is, are you stunning a linebacker every play? Are you a heavy blitz team? Are you a heavy read team? Or is there a combination somewhere in between?
I think it's in between. We do try to send at least four every play. Sometimes we'll send 5. Sometimes we'll show and back out. That's something that we did a little bit more this year. But I think, again, it goes back to game plan and, what your kids can handle. We had a sophomore Mike linebacker. That's who I kind of run the defense through this year. And he did a great job for us. But the previous linebacker, Mike Linebacker, who was a 4-year starter, you know, he was kind of like a coach on the field, and I could feed him all this information and he would retain it and call everything out and make the checks and things like that. Well, for this sophomore, I had to change my way of game planning and coaching through him, just because he was a sophomore and kind of new to what we were doing. So, you know, but back to your original question, yeah, I try to make sure that we're bringing at least one person. If we get into long downage, we'll probably drop 8 for the most part, unless I feel like we can get pressure and hit home on our blitzes. But you should at least see one coming. Most likely 2, depending on down and distance and things like that.
Do you and I'm not asking you to give away all your secrets here, but this is more of a philosophical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is your best defensive lineman one of the ends, or is it your nose? Because I've heard both. I heard if you put your best player over the center, that there's going to be more problems for that guy. And I've also heard if you put your best player as the field side 5 technique, that he becomes a hassle and you almost force teams into running into the boundary.
Right.
Or be like you guys that just are loaded and you got all 3 dudes up front.
No, it's. I mean, we've had some talent at that position. Now, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, you have. Hey, I'll ask my 2 sons who've had to block those guys.
So we were blessed a couple of years ago. We were blessed because we had a defensive end who was 6'5", 240, went to Dartmouth, and then we had probably arguably our 1B defensive lineman be the nose. So I don't have a great answer for you. I think we have done a good job of finding noses or being blessed with noses that, you know, do a good job of disrupting the center. Because you're right. If you can disrupt the center, that's going to mess up the whole timing of the play because the snap is going to be messed up. He's more worried about blocking the guy in front of him versus snapping the ball. And we've created a lot of chaos being able to do that. But there's something to be said for a good defensive end too. Now, I will say philosophy-wise, we're a spill team anyway. So we're expecting the ball to spill out regardless of what side you run to. So really, I guess to answer your question, I would say nose first and then defensive end, because the defensive end just has to be technically sound. If he can close a down block and spill every time, you know, he's going to do his job and we're going to make plays.
Do you train the defensive linemen all the same way? Because I know somebody that coaches the stack, that their ends are coached by one person and their nose is coached by a second person.
Right. So that's what we've tried to get to as much as possible. We actually had the opportunity to do that this year, where Coach Colvin coached our defensive ends, and then we had another coach, Darian Howard, come on staff this year, and he coached our nose. And we were blessed to have Darian. He was, a 2-year starter at West Virginia, played at CJ. So, our kids really respected him and what he said because, he's walked the walk. So it hasn't been like that every year. We've usually had one coach, but, when you get 2 coaches, it's definitely, I don't want to say easier, but it makes things a lot smoother when you're coaching and getting things done. No,
absolutely. All right, so here's the next question. How do you deal with 4 verticals if you're playing one high safety?
So what we do is, our overhangs, we'll split the difference. We'll apex. I'm assuming you're talking 2x2.
Yep, we'll start with 2x2.
Yep. So our hang players will apex the number 2 receiver in the in-man on line of scrimmage. And we've kind of adopted this technique that I don't want to say I made up, but I have not seen many teams do it. But we'll take him and he'll get his run read. If it's pass, he'll open up, and he does like this shuffle technique. And we do that because we do it because of our offense. Our offense likes to run hitch by number 1, seam by number 2. So we're telling the corner he's got to split or apex 1 and 2 if they go vertical. So if that guy hitches up, his responsibility is to buzz out to the flat right now. He has zero responsibility to get hands on number 2. His eyes are open to 1 because his body is taking away the throw to number 2.
Okay.
So he's getting out there. And now if they both go vertical, that alerts him, now I can get hands on, get a good declate, close the space between 2 and 1 for the corner. The corner is now apexing the 2 receivers.
Okay.
We don't rely on I know some teams rely on that free safety to play the number 2s. We don't rely on our free safety to do that. We just felt like we didn't have the athleticism at that position when we implemented the defense to do that. If we feel like we have, a guy that can start on one hash and still break up the pass on the other, then, that's something that we can look into. But we like what we do. We put it on our corners just because I think they can see the ball a little bit easier. They can make the play on the ball. We've had some pretty good success with it, and it also helps that, we have some talented kids out there playing corner. So,
and it's high school football still.
Right.
And getting a high school kid to the hardest throw. I mean, I don't care who you are. The hardest throw. You watch the NFL guys. These guys get paid $1 million. How many vertical routes get thrown out of bounds by guys who making millions of dollars?
Exactly.
Right. So having your corner lean in on 2.
Yep. So put the pressure on the quarterback, make him make that throw, and and that's how we teach it. That's what we tell them when we install it the first day is, look, not a lot of high school quarterbacks are going to make that throw. So trust that what you're looking at and how you're playing it will get you there if he wants to take a shot out there. So
right, especially if he's on the opposite hash. You're
right.
the corner to the field, and they're going to run 2 verticals, 1 up the hash, 1 up the numbers.
Right.
He's going to throw the hash before he throws the number 1.
Exactly. So you got, and we always tell you got time. You got time. Don't rush it. Don't panic. You have time to get out there. So our corners have done a good job with it. And so what they do technique wise is they kind of do a shuffle, turn and run type deal to help them stay open to number 2, not lose sight of number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And if they throw it to number 1, all they have to do is kind of wheel turn, get to the hip and make a play. So it's good technique that we've had pretty good success with. But our corners sometimes just don't go up and make a play when you need them to. We've had
they're still high school kids.
Exactly. We've had that too, where they're in position and you think they're gonna make a play, and then all of a sudden the other kid gets the ball, and it's like we couldn't play it any better except for just make the play. So you get both of it, but if it's 3-by-1, we kind of combo coverage it, and that's where we talk about that boundary safety rolling back.
Yeah.
So we'll play cover 2 to that trip side, and then that boundary safety is going to cross key that number 3 receiver. If he goes vertical, we'll lock the boundary safety on 3 vertical, and then we'll play cover 2 to 1 and 2, and with help with the hang player, because he ends up being the free player in that. The strong side hang player ends up being the free player in coverage, helping underneath if it's comeback or any type of swap situation. So
no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of those things. And then the other thing is you got to get somebody to truly run. They'll line up, everybody worries about the 3-by-1 4 verticals. I'm like, I don't know how many teams really can get number 3 vertical across the other hash. He's usually running a drag kind of over there, maybe at 10 yards.
Right.
Like the linebacker should be able to help a little bit on that.
Right. So
unless they've done such a great job, maybe they're going to do a little play action with it, that they're zone reading that guy right at that linebacker, trying to suck him up. But
and honestly, we probably practice against 3 verticals more than we actually see it in a game. There hasn't been a lot of teams who run that concept, especially out of 3-by-1.
Right.
It's usually some type of swap or some type of wheel route or something, something I would say tricky, if you will, versus just flat out verts.
Awesome. Well, Coach, hey, I've definitely taken a lot out of this one. So we got 2 segments left. The first one is the Gamewrecker and Slobberknockers. So
Okay.
who's the best game wrecker? The kid that's messed up more offensive game plans and they've had to do more against him.
I've had a lot of kids.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be a hard one.
I think the first kid that comes to mind was a kid by the name of Rocky Stark. He was one of our stack backers. And that kid didn't always follow the game plan, but he always ended up where he needed to be.
Right.
You love coaching those kids because it stresses you out in the moment, but he's making a lot of plays for you.
He's the no. Yes.
Exactly. That was the type of kid he was. You know, he saw an opening, he would just go and he would make the play. Great tackler. You know, he was undersized linebacker, but he did a great job for us. The other one would probably be David Frederick, who ironically is a stack backer as well. Just all over the place wrestler, so he understood body placement, movements, and
leverage.
Exactly. So, you know, it was great. Unfortunately, David was a senior this past year, so we won't get to be working together anymore. But you know, those two were probably two of the best linebackers that I've coached in my short coaching career. So.
All right. Sounds great. Sound like 2 players for sure. All right. So what's the biggest slobber knocker hit you've ever seen as a player or coach?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, it was against our team. We were in the playoffs. In 2017, we were playing New Richmond. Probably the coldest game that I've ever coached in. Wind chill was like -12 or something. Like, it was cold. Our quarterback, you know, sprints out of the pocket, gets the first down, and that New Richmond had a quarterback who was playing safety. I want to say he went to Eastern Michigan or Marshall or you know, one of those smaller D1 schools. But kid was athletic, 190, and our quarterback, instead of just going out of bounds and not getting hit, he thought he could put his shoulder down, and it just didn't work out for him. We thought he might have died for about 3 seconds, but he popped up. I mean, he popped up. You know, he finished the game, and we ended up winning the game and going to the regional final. So, but that one sticks out in my mind for sure. Because everybody in the stadium, as cold as it was, everybody was, ooh. It was one of those hits. So
Awesome. You know, nothing against quarterbacks, but it is a lot more fun when those guys get hit, especially when they're outside the pocket as much.
Not when it's ours.
Not when it's yours. Not when it's yours. You want your guys to be doing that, right?
Exactly.
Right. All right, Coach. Hey, last segment of the show is always called "Bring in the House."
Okay.
Got to put a little pressure on you.
Uh-oh.
5 random questions,
okay.
kind of like just give me your first initial response. All right.
All right.
What's your favorite movie quote?
Probably too explicit for YouTube, but the barbershop scene and Coming to America.
Okay. All right. Who has the best wings in Dayton?
Best wing, Roosters.
Roosters. Good. All right. Who's the better pro wrestling villain? The Iron Sheik or Jake the Snake Roberts?
Probably have to go Iron Sheik.
Okay.
Jake the Snake is a close second, though.
All right. Which is the biggest game loss for the Miami Hurricanes?
Oh, God.
Catholics versus the Convicts in 88 or Flutie versus Phelan in 84?
Catholics versus Convicts.
Okay. All right. And then this last one, you're going to have to explain, I think, to me a little bit. I was told to ask you, what is the sudden change drill, and why do you always cheat to win?
So sudden change is something that, you know, me and another coach who, again, Coach Maurice Hardin, worked at Urbana together. That was a period that happened out of nowhere. So we'd be practicing, we'd be in individual, special teams, whatever. Head coach would blow the whistle, stop everything, yell out sudden change. It's best versus best. And then you just scrimmage. I don't know about the cheating part. I don't know about the cheating part. I think if I know who gave you that information,
you know who gave me the information, Coach.
I think he's just a little bit upset that I have the better record in these sudden change situations. But it's an opportunity for our kids to kind of redirect focus, and you have these sudden change moments where offense turns the ball over or defense gets the ball back, and then you figure out what happened. What do you do after that? And it's always fun. It always gets heated. There's been a couple times where people have been chin to chin, but it shows your kids the competitive nature of the game, and your kids get fired up. The quarterback that I just talked about, every time he sees me, he brings up sudden change because I always used to talk smack to him, and he used to talk smack to me. So it's great. It's a great period, and it's random. That's the best thing about it. It's not built into the schedule. You just whenever the head coach feels like doing it, he blows the whistle, puts the ball down, says first down, and you got to go. So.
Well, hey, just so you know, when I got that information about you, how you always have to cheat to win it, I said, well, that's a typical offensive guy who has all the rules in his favor,
exactly.
accusing us poor defensive guys of having to cheat to win.
He knows better. He because at Urbana, I don't think the defense won one time. Like out of all we did sudden change every day, and I don't think the defense won. So
right.
He already knows the deal. So. This is coming from the same guy who made the coaches go on the sideline and coach from the sideline. So
Coach, it is fun. And it does. Hey, I tell you what, that's the kind of competition in practice where your kids are going to get more out of that competition than some of the other competitions I've seen. Like the one competition, like one-on-one pass rush. I think that's a loaded drill, and I'm a defensive coach.
Right.
I'm like, that defensive lineman ain't got to worry about no run fake. He just taking off.
Exactly.
That sudden change drill. I tell you what, I like that drill. I'm gonna add that one on my list of drills to make sure we get done.
There you go.
Coach, hey, I can see why CJ has been such a great power in the Dayton area and in the state of Ohio. I think you guys are doing a lot of great things. I appreciate you taking time out of your day here and joining us on the program.
I appreciate it, Coach. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit of ball. Starting to get that itch back. Had a few days off. Now it's time to get refocused and focus on that 2021 season.
Absolutely. Hey, viewers, thanks for joining us this week. We'll catch you next week on another episode of Gamewreckers and Slobberknockers.